What do we do with crayons? Robert, don't go to sleep. I've worked hard on this. I'm really excited. What do we do with crayons? We color things. We create things. We make an impression. We make a mark. We put our ideas on paper. We kind of inspiration in a way, and we make something beautiful and pretty, right? Hopefully, if we can color in lines. I can't color in lines. But what we make doesn't last forever. It kind of goes away. No matter how many beautiful colors we use, how many different blends we create, nothing lasts forever. Sometimes it just disappears. And then we have nothing because it's gone. See all the beautiful colors? On our own, we can't really make things last, but everything's temporary. Sometimes it just disappears. You're less impressed with this than those guys. You know, I worked hard on this. But with God, the colors last forever. Our impression. That's part of the trick. You see, with God, y'all are making this brother hard. You can have this back next week, I promise. No, you can't look in there. With God, things last forever, okay? With us, it's just temporary.
And then they all go down.
It's magic.
It's magic, thank you. It's magic.
It ain't magic. Let me see you laugh first. Don't make it appear again.
Jan, take them back. I'm through with children.
Don't hang in the same order. That ain't magic.
Thank you, Joe. I tried.
There's a future engineer going back there.
All right, so this morning we're going to look at a story that is so familiar. We all know the story inside and out. It's one of the parables in the Bible that we learned probably a long time ago. But we're going to look at it and visit it a little bit this morning. Every once in a while, every now and then, we come across somebody who may be overly concerned with the amount of evil that's in the world today. Someone perhaps who has seen something or witnessed something so shocking or heard something so vulgar that they feel that something just has to be done. And a lot of times as Christians, they may turn to us and think that we should be the ones that do something about it. But what is the Christian response to evil? What should good people do in bad situations? Although you won't find it anywhere in the Gospel of Matthew, it's that question, or one very similar to it, that lies behind the parable of the wheat and the weeds as we find in chapter 13. A farmer had a field, Jesus said, perfect and pure, ready to produce nothing but good grain. But in the night, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat. And when the wheat came up, so did the weeds. And the servants who worked in the field came to the master. They came to the master and said, didn't you sow good seeds? And he says, yes. But they said, look at your field. There's nothing but weeds in it now. It's full of weeds. And later Jesus would say that the field is like the world, being corrupt and greedy, weedy, if you will. Not the way that it's supposed to be. Now, no one needs to tell us that in the world that we live in today, we live in a world of corruption. We live in a world full of weeds. We can scan the internet, we watch the headlines, we see the news, we read the newspaper, we see things each and every day that just bombard us with bad things. And it's depressing. It can get us down. And the more we pay attention to these sorts of things, the more discouraged we get, the more we shake our heads and wonder, thinking about the enormous difference that the way things are and the way things should be within the world. So we're left feeling overwhelmed, confused. We ask, what can be done about it? What can we do about it? And there may be other times we feel especially outraged or upset, and we find ourselves brave enough that we actually think that we can do something about it. That we go out in the world, we raise our hand and volunteer to try to pull up the evil by its roots. And that's when the Master says, wait. He says, wait, hold on, stop. And as we start to look at the parables of Jesus, especially this one, as we dissect it a little bit, we need to pay attention to the surprises that lay behind these stories, to those places where expectations are often upset, where things happen that we don't expect to happen. And it's in this place, in this particular story, that this is the case, because what you expect the Master to say is not what you get at all. In fact, it's the complete opposite. You would expect them to say, yes, by all means, go out in the field and pull up these weeds that have come up, because we've worked so hard preparing the soil. We've worked so hard sowing the seeds. We've worked so hard making sure there's enough water and sun and all this stuff to have a good crop. And now these weeds have come and infected everything, have corrupted it. So go out and pull these weeds. But instead, he says no. He says, let the wheat and the weeds grow together until the harvest. And if this story really is, as Jesus says, a story about evil in the world and God's response to it, what he's telling us is that God doesn't have any immediate plans to remove evil from the world, to uproot these weeds that's among us, at least not for now. And here's why. When the servants volunteered to pull up the weeds, the Master says no. He says, for in gathering them you may do more harm than good, because you may pull up the wheat as well. Now notice his words here. He doesn't say that they could pull up the wheat, but that they would indeed pull up the wheat. Because the type of weed that grows among here in this story is something very similar to the wheat itself. It's a very specific kind. It's a kind of grass with long, slender, leafy-like things and bristles at the end that looks very much like wheat. It would be easy to mistake it for the real thing. It's hard to tell it apart. And in a frenzy of going out and pulling weeds, inevitably we'd be pulling the wheat up as well. And as we look at it like this, we can see how some sort of caution may be applied to dealing with evil in the world. In other words, some things look very similar. Are we able to tell things apart as we should? Now, in some cases, it's very obvious to see evil. We can see that every day in some cases. But in others, it's hard because things blend in. We try not to be judgmental. We try not to profile a certain type of person. But it is in our human nature to put people in categories, to try to separate them out between the good and the bad. Have you ever met somebody for the first time and your first impression was you just don't like them? That there's something about that person that rubs you the wrong way, that you just don't like, that you can't put your finger on it, but something about it. And then as you get to know them a little bit better, as you hang around them a little bit more often, you start to understand and you start to see them in a different light, and pretty soon that you become friends with them. It happens. So the problem is we just can't tell from first impressions. We really don't know. It's not up to us to judge or to determine who may be worthy or who is not worthy. Because there's plenty of good people with bad roots and even more bad people with good roots. And when we try to pick and choose between them, we're doing more harm than good. And in the story that Jesus tells, the enemy sows his evil seed and then he just goes away. He's confident that the harm that he intended to do will be done, and he is not needed to hang around. Damage will be done. One commentator wrote this. He says the enemy doesn't have any real power over goodness anyway. The wheat is in the field. The kingdom is in the world. And there's not one thing he can do about it. But the enemy can trick. He can sucker the forces of goodness into taking up arms against the confusion that he has introduced to do his work for him. That's why he goes away after sowing the seeds. There's no need for him to hang around. There's no positive action to take. All he does is sprinkle a generous helping of darkness, and he waits for the children of light to come and become flustered and do his work for him. But in this story, Jesus says, wait. Wait. Let the wheat and the weed grow up together until the harvest. And when the harvest comes, I will tell the reapers to collect the weeds, bind them into bundles, and be burned. And gather the wheat and store it in my barn. And if we look at this story, we can see and we can understand that the master doesn't really like the weeds in his fields. It's not that he likes having that. He just has a different plan for dealing with them. His solution to the problem is ultimate, not proximate. And Jesus wants us to hear more often than not that God's way of dealing with evil in the world, with the way of dealing with evil and bad and harm within our cities and in our families, in our communities, in our churches, in our neighborhoods, is not immediately, but finally, once and for all. And this is something that Jesus should know. Because in his time, there was plenty of darkness, there was plenty of evil, there was plenty of sin in the world. And if he had asked his disciples at any particular given time, they could have pointed out dozens of social concerns that might have been very well taken care of by divine intervention. There was plenty of things, plenty of problems going on that Jesus could have taken care of in a heartbeat. Poverty, prejudice, drunkenness, oppression, prostitution, disease, drought, name it, the list goes on. And the disciples were saying, look at the world. Look at the world, it's full of weeds. Surely this is not the way it's supposed to be. And they were right. They were right about that. But their way of dealing with a problem, much like ours, is not the way that God deals with problems. They thought by overcoming the Romans, reestablishing Israel as a political power, as a political kingdom, electing the right man to rule it, everything would be as it ought to be. Kind of sounds familiar. They thought that they could fight their way, or legislate their way, or vote their way into the kind of kingdom that would be pleasing to God. And they were wrong. Read the Gospels. You'll be amazed about how much little faith that Jesus puts in the political process. He's more concerned about rescuing people than programs. And he does it God's way, not our way. By going to Jerusalem, being arrested, tried, convicted, crucified. It would be easy to think that hanging there on that cross, that God's way failed. That evil had triumphed. That the field of the world was overtaken by weeds. But that's not what happened. Because of the death of Jesus, we believe that somehow evil was overcome. Ultimately conquered. Now, it may reign for a while, but it won't reign forever. One of these days, we pray that all the evil in the world is going to be gathered up into bundles and burned in the furnace. Jesus tells us it may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but one day, evil will be kicked right in the teeth, and good will triumph. The righteous will then shine like the sun. However, in the meantime, we're left with no choice but to accept the fact that the world we live in is full of weeds. Rather than trying to pull up every plant that looks vaguely suspicious. Because the truth is that none of us is completely free of evil. None of us are pure wheat. There's more bad in the best of us. There's more good in the worst of us than any of us would like to admit in this lifetime anyway. Which is reason to believe that we should let God sort it out. Leave it to Him to sort. And maybe we should be trying to be wheat in the world rather than pulling up weeds. Because when the harvest finally comes, that's really all that matters. Imagine for a second, what would happen if we adopted a process of weed pulling here? In other words, if we drew a circle around the little town of Helena, Alabama, we made a solemn vow that we would not let any evil whatsoever cross that border. That no weeds would grow on the inside. First of all, what we'd have to do is do a little weed killing of our own and probably end up with nothing but dirt. There will be no grass left at all. But however, if we adopted that policy, we could easily spend the rest of our lives protecting that boundary. Standing shoulder to shoulder with clubs and pitchforks and whatever else, trying to keep evil out. Trying to keep crime away, trying to keep all the bad stuff on the other side. And it would do nothing but take up all our time and all our energy. But think about it for a second. What if we were successful? What if we were able to accomplish just that, to keep all the evil out of that boundary? What if we succeeded? We would have a town that was characterized by the absence of evil, which is not the same as a town characterized by the presence of good. Maybe that's what Jesus was talking about, was trying to relate to us in this story. That it's better to have a field full of weeds than a field with nothing in it at all. So maybe we should concentrate our efforts on what good we can actually do in the world. Should we try to spend our time determining who to keep out, who to keep at a distance, who to let in, which weed to pull? Or should we spend our efforts doing other things like putting up a basketball goal, wrapping our arms around little children, telling Bible stories, singing songs about Jesus? Which is the most effective way to show the love of Christ? To try to go around and pull out every bad weed we see, or perhaps fertilize the wheat so it can grow stronger? Perhaps we shouldn't worry about the weeds so much and concentrate on just planting a little more wheat and let God work it out in the end. Because we do live in a world full of weeds, and perhaps the best policy to adapt is the one that we learn from Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 12, verse 21. When he says, "Do not overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." That's the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let us pray. Father God, again, we do thank you for this day that you give to us and the blessings we have. Father, we thank you for the chance that we can be the wheat in the field. That with you by our side, we can grow and grow stronger in all that we do. Father, that we can be a positive light and influence to those around us. That you will take our hand and guide us in all, Lord, so we can do your will, do your work. Father God, we just ask that you go with us now as we leave this place. Walk with us and guide us, protect us, and forgive us, Lord. Of course, in Christ's name we ask these things. Amen.